So it's now been just over 1 week since I grabbed the PlayStation 5 when it released here in the US, and I thought about making a video immediately. Like I get the thing, we do the unboxing, and then I play it throughout the day, and then the next day I put up a video going over my thoughts on the PlayStation 5, but I realized something. I was still in that initial hype phase, that kind of that honeymoon phase that you're in when you first get a new system, a new cell phone, a new TV. It's just this amazing thing that is brand new to you. And I felt like I would have a better sense of the PlayStation 5 if I gave it a week and allowed some of that initial excitement and amazement even to kind of go away a bit, and I could give it a very objective look with some impressions. And that's what I wanted to do here today, just kind of give you guys my brief overview and thoughts of my time with the PlayStation 5 so far. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you like down below and subscribe if you are new here. So first off, let's talk about the look of the PlayStation 5 a bit. It's grown on me, I will say, since I've had it in my living room or downstairs when I'm doing recording for gameplay footage and all of this. It at first kind of stuck out, but it did start to blend in a little bit. However, this looks way different than what most people will have in their house. Sony went for a more futuristic look so that it would stick out a bit, and the overall curves of the system do kind of have this optical illusion almost to it, to where you can still tell it's big, but it doesn't seem as large because of that. I'm still not a big fan of the glossy plastic on the center here, and I know they wanted to go with a two-tone look where they had kind of a matte white finish outside, and then they went with glossy black on the inside, so it contrasted heavily, but I would have been much happier with just a matte black plastic finish on the inside. And every time I ask someone, what do you think of this system? They really have to think. They really have to sit there and try to come up to some sort of opinion, because it really does just stick out from everyday life for a lot of people. So if Sony was trying to make a statement piece here, something that would start some conversation if you had people over in the living room and they had to sit there and just kind of come to terms with what you've placed in your entertainment center, well, they did it. Also, the size of the system, yes, it is a very large system. It's the biggest system we've technically had released to us, especially in the past couple decades. So you will have to plan around it at least a little bit. You can try to put it in your entertainment center, but if it's not set up to accept something this size, it might just end up next to your TV where it's like on top of your entertainment center. It's just open air. So one way or the other, it's probably going to be like one of the first things that people see is when they walk in the room. Also, when it comes to the overall noise of the system, it is good, with one exception. Now, the fan inside is very quiet, and they put a lot of time and effort, we talked about in the teardown, to make sure that the system stayed cool without having to push that fan into some crazy setting like we've had with the PlayStation 4 Pro. So when it comes to heat dissipation and a quieter fan, they knocked it out of the park. But when it comes to the disk drive, it is still very loud. It is very noticeable when you put a disk in and it has to read, and it can be kind of annoying. Now, if you're someone who has the all-digital version, you're not going to have to worry about that at all. You're just going to have a very quiet system. But just remember, if you're somebody with a disk-based unit, whenever this system has to spin up to check that you have the disk in there or go to install a game, it will get kind of noisy. Okay, so UI and features. When you first turn the system on, this is what you're going to be seeing when you get to the main menu. And at first, I looked at that and I said, you know what? This looks really, really clean. We had the video released to us where they did a little bit of a walkthrough for us and talked about some of the features. I was a little concerned, however, about how small the icons are, and when I see it in person on like a 55-inch 4K display, it's perfectly fine. But when I go over to a smaller display, especially if we step down to something like 1080p, I think you could have some issues, believe it or not, with how small these icons are and really how legible they are even, because I think it's going to be up to the developers and the publishers as to what these little squares will look like on your home screen. And you know what? You might not be able to tell immediately what a game is if they don't make it as obvious as possible because of how small these squares are. So based on the UI, I don't think Sony really even had 1080p in mind that much. The whole UI is completely rendered at 4K with HDR, and it looks really, really good if you have a nicer display. Anything above 50-inch, with 4K, HDR, it's going to look really, really good. And you know what? The transition between like the main menu and a game was way smoother for me than something with the Series X, where it would kind of have to go like black out on my TV and then handshake once again and then come back. I never had that with this PlayStation 5. It was very smooth going into a game. And that is basically the running theme here. Everything is just fast, like really fast. Massive difference from the PlayStation 4, where everything was slow. Well, a lot of stuff was slow. Like, for example, going to the marketplace was an experience on its own. Like, you wanted to set aside some time just to go shopping on the PlayStation 4's network. It just took forever. Whereas with the PS5, you scroll left, you scroll down, and you're just in the marketplace. It's immediate. It's super quick, and I really like that because this whole system is based around turning on, getting you into the game, getting you into the marketplace, getting you around as quick and as responsive as possible. Now, of course, the reason for this is the new SSD that is inside of the PlayStation 5 that Sony has been talking up quite a bit, but it makes it so that navigating the system is very, very fast, and that also translates into games loading quickly, whether it's respawning or just getting into the game from the title screen. As an example, here's how long it takes for you to go from the title screen and main menu part for Spider-Man when you hit continue to actually being able to swing around the city. As for some of the features, I did try a few of them out, but like, for example, the screen sharing, I didn't really try that one out at all. It looked cool, but I just haven't had any reason to really use it yet. I'm sure something will happen down the road where we will, but I did try out the activities feature, and you know what? It is a good idea, but I think it is a generation too late. Now, the idea here is when you pull up your activity cards, you will have different objectives or levels that are set up. As an example, Spider-Man Miles Morales, you may have come across a challenge, like a traversal challenge, and you can just jump right to that immediately. You don't have to load up the game, then go through the main menu, and then go to the challenge. It'll just take you right there. And that is actually something that is kind of appreciated because if you don't have as much time to play a game, especially with like how it was on the PS4 where it was an event just to get into a game at times, it gets you in, you can do what you need to do there with your challenge, and then you can back right back out of the PS5 and turn it off. My problem here is the system's already fast. This would have been something that would have been much more jarring and much more useful with the PlayStation 4. But like Miles Morales getting into the game and then getting through the main menu is like, we're talking seconds. So while these are really cool additions with the activity cards, I've used them in Sackboy, I used it in Astro's Playroom and Spider-Man, it's not as necessary now as it would have been last generation. Now, you do know I like to go into a lot of the options in games, and I checked out some of the options in the PlayStation 5, and they have universal options here, which is really cool because that means you won't have to go into every single game and do things like turn off rumble. You won't have to weaken or turn off your adaptive triggers. All of that can be altered in the main menu itself. The adaptive triggers was the one that I was most interested in. Can we turn them off? Can we weaken them without having to go into each and every single game to disable them? You can do that. There's a lot of things you can change outside of the game that then just have settings that carry over. Again, ways to save time for you. Now, I did pick up some software here for the launch. You can see I have Spider-Man, Miles Morales. I did finish that one up. Demon's Souls, I'm about halfway through. It's kind of hard with Demon's Souls because you can sort of go to different worlds if you want. It's not encouraged because it'll just kill you like right away. But I did kind of move around a little bit to farm souls, pick up a few weapons that would make things a little easier. But I'm about halfway done just based on the number of bosses and areas I've cleared so far. Sackboy, because I wanted to pick up a 3D platformer with online network and local co-op play from Sony here. And I thought it was interesting that Sackboy gets his own game with the title and all of that. Pretty cool to see that. And then Astro's Playroom did come with the system itself already installed. So right now, Demon's Souls is my favorite game for the PlayStation 5. I'm having a blast with it. Of course, I have that love-hate relationship right now because you're having a good time with it. You feel like you're on top of the world and you're untouchable, and then you round a corner and the game just kills you. Like it brings you back down to earth real quick after you have one of those small victories in the game. And then Spider-Man, also very, very good. Now, the thing with Spider-Man is it doesn't feel like a massive evolution from Spider-Man that we had on the PlayStation 4, or now Spider-Man Remastered that is on the PlayStation 5, but it feels like more of a continuation of the story as we build towards Spider-Man 2. But it was a blast. It's a ton of fun. And I actually recommend grabbing Spider-Man Miles Morales over everything right now for the PS5, just because I have a feeling some people might be introduced to the Souls franchise through Demon's Souls. They have no idea what it is. They just know that it is the PS5's big launch title because it's the big exclusive for the PS5, and they're probably not going to enjoy it. Not because it's a bad game, just because it's Demon's Souls. It's there to annoy you, to aggravate you, to give small victories, and then make you feel like you're terrible at games afterwards. As for overall game visuals and performance, I mean, the games look a lot sharper since we're dealing with native 4K for a lot of these games now, rather than the PlayStation 4 Pro, which would do checkerboard upscaling quite frequently. It was much more common for it to upscale a game rather than do native 4K. But the thing that I'm really happy about, which is a big focus, it seems, at least early on for the PlayStation 5 and this generation coming up, is higher frame rate. So we have 60 frames per second modes for things like Spider-Man. Demon's Souls has a performance mode. I like this quite a bit because the games now just feel way more fluid. But out of all of the games available on the PlayStation 5 right now, the game that is the most next-generation PlayStation 5 title is Astro's Playroom, and that leads me into the DualSense controller, which, without the DualSense controller, I'm going to say this now, without this controller right here, the PlayStation 5 would not feel like much of a next-gen upgrade. Now, it would because of the SSD, but I feel like most people are going to get this system and they're going to say, oh, it's a bit faster. Yeah, it looks a little cleaner. Okay, yeah, visual look better. And it's because of that PlayStation 4 Pro. If this was from the baseline PlayStation 4 and we never got mid-gen refreshes, this on its own would feel like a massive leap because we're talking 4K and all of this. We've already been talking about 4K, but the DualSense has so much potential and is so jarring when you first use it. You have no choice but to say, yeah, I guess this really is a next-gen system. Seriously, when you get your PlayStation 5, fire up Astro's Playroom, and just in like the first 5 minutes, it will just throw so much at you with this DualSense controller that it'll make your head spin. Really, it will. What that we have here with this DualSense controller is something that I hope the developers actually use. And I say actually use because a lot of things on the DualShock 4 were very promising in the beginning, and then we had things like the touchpad turn into a massive map button. Like that was basically it. So I hope that the DualSense controller is actually taken advantage of, because with things like its advanced haptic feedback that works in conjunction with the speaker and those adaptive triggers, it is a completely different experience than what we're used to with DualShock 4. So as a really good example here, Astro's Playroom, when you're running around with Astro, we have the speaker and the advanced haptic feedback work in conjunction, because the advanced haptic feedback can emit kind of rumble alongside of what the sound is doing. You can actually take sound and feed it to this controller with the rumble itself, and it will produce different vibrations based on it. So we have that kind of working together, and the speaker will kick sounds out while we have different rumble to go along with it, and it is this really interesting sensation just when Astro is walking around. Couple that with the adaptive triggers, where one example, Astro gets in this big suit and starts climbing up the side of a mountain, and every time you grab onto a rock or just the side of a ledge, you'll have those triggers inside, the pieces that stop your adaptive trigger from pushing down, kind of lock into place just enough so that you feel like you're actually grabbing them when you press the trigger down. It is a really odd sensation, something I've never seen before in games. Basically, the part about this DualSense controller that gets me the most excited is I think it has a lot of possibility to surprise us when we think we know everything it can do, especially with those adaptive triggers. When we heard from the Deathloop developers that when your gun jams, you won't be able to push the trigger down very much at all. It'll go like maybe halfway down and then just stop when it jams. Yeah, I could see that now after using it, and I think it would be really cool to see that. So that's something I'm looking forward to a lot this generation. Developers, you have to do stuff with this controller because it really will separate your games on the PS5 from other games. And you know what? There have been times I bought Call of Duty on the Xbox and I saw a video online, someone showcasing the adaptive trigger working with some of the different guns and weapons in the game differently. And I really did have this like slight bit of buyer's remorse. I'm like, I like the offset sticks, but those adaptive triggers are really cool. But it's not all perfect with the DualSense controller. The battery life still isn't that great. Now, look, it's not bad, but I have to say battery life for this was like 6 to 8 hours, at least in my experience, and it will depend on which game you are playing. Like Astro's Playroom certainly ate up the controller's battery much faster, for me anyway, than Demon's Souls did. Every time I'm done playing at night, I go and I hit the button to go back to the menu, and I look at the battery indicator and it's down to like 1 bar. 2 bars if I'm lucky. Basically, I do notice it depleting, whereas with the Xbox or the Switch with their controllers, I rarely notice them depleting after a single game session of a couple of hours. So yeah, that's something they need to work with. I believe they could increase the battery life in this controller just by upping the size of the battery inside, as there is still some room, or who knows, maybe a revision of the DualSense comes out and it just becomes overall more efficient. But the DualSense is a high quality, solid piece of hardware that I would like to see developers continue to build on. So here's hoping they don't forget about it. But those are just some of my initial impressions on the PlayStation 5 as I've been playing it for the past week or so. As more games come out, especially from first party, and we get to know the system a bit better, I'm sure I'll make another video, maybe a year with the PlayStation 5, something like that. But I know there's still a lot of curiosity around the system, so I wanted to talk about it just a bit here. And I think we'll have some other really fun videos come up around the question of heat inside of the system. How hot does the system get? How loud does it get? There's still a lot of interesting things I'd like to cover here, but let me know what you guys think about the PlayStation 5 so far, if you picked one up, or if you've been kind of keeping up to date on some of the coverage for it, if there's anything you've seen that's really impressed you so far. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.